one of India's finest historians, Madhavan Palat, who has just completed editing the entire 100 volumes, the selected works of Jawaharlal Nehru. I'll be talking to him about this impeccable, priceless work of scholarship, and he'll be talking to me about my recent biography, Checkered Brilliance, The Many Lives of V.K. Krishnamenon. So Madhavan, 47 years, 100 volumes, are you satisfied?
Yes and no, as with all these things. Satisfied that we brought it to a conclusion at least, but very unsatisfied that there is so much left out. There is so much more to be done. In the earlier volumes there were many items which were not taken into the selection, which I would have taken, because I suppose they interpreted selected works as selected works.
Yeah.
I tended to make it more like complete works.
So we have 100 volumes of the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, and we have 100 volumes of the selected works of Jawaharlal Nehru. Tell us, to a student of history, to a general public interested in the evolution of Indian politics in the 20th century, how valuable are these 100 volumes of Mahatma Gandhi and 100 volumes of Jawaharlal Nehru?
Oh, immensely. Because if you start the study of modern Indian history in the 20th century, you would start with precisely these two. Gandhi gives you a panorama of the whole of the development of the independence movement, and it is so wide-ranging, it goes so deep into every part of Indian life. Gandhi was not a mere political leader. He was everything. So he commented on everything from the most private aspects of life to the most national and global. And profoundly moral, religious, ethical, everything. There's no subject he did not touch. This is the whole point about
food,
being
diet,
a prophet tighter.
His sanitary habits,
yes,
his dietary
everything.
habits.
There's nothing he did not do.
Yeah.
Nehru did not go so far. On the other hand, he was a national leader and a global leader, and touched upon every aspect of politics, of ideology, of the development of the nation, and pretty nearly everything that Gandhi did, but not in quite the same way. That is, not personal lives, not sexual life, details of that kind. Only a person like Gandhi could have done that.
Did your views on Nehru change after these 100 volumes? You edited about 50 of these 100?
I edited 42 of the volumes.
Yeah.
And I must say my view of Nehru changed incredibly for the better. I was an admirer of Nehru in any case to start with. And as it went on, I was more and more impressed by how much, how much a greater man he was than I thought he was.
In what way were you critical to begin with, that you had to change your mind after 42 volumes?
Well, the usual way. We thought he was a bit weak and fumbling and so on. He did not take decisions as firmly as he should have. That's a sort of received opinion so often. But when I see all the correspondence right through, certainly there is no question of him being fumbling and weak. It is what is required to keep the country together. You have to carry such diverse elements together in one big movement and in one complex state. And the manner in which he was doing it, that I could see in the archives.
Well, it is interesting, the Krishnamenon book draws extensively on the selected works.
Yeah.
Because Krishnamenon is a very pivotal figure in Nehru's life from 1935 to 1962. What's the sense you got after reading Checkered Brilliance?
Krishnamenon is so much, is a third figure, I would say, who, along with Subhash Chandra Bose, I would put it, third figure in this galaxy. He is global and national. And that only Subhash Chandra Bose also is. I don't think anybody else comes.
Even Gandhi was actually, he was national and local. Whereas
yes.
Nehru and Bose and Menon were national and global.
But Gandhi had the role of a prophet for the globe.
Yeah.
And he did, by the way, have very subtle views on how certain aspects of international representation should be done. For example, the manner in which he visited Mussolini is an example.
Yeah.
Krishna Menon would have opposed totally.
And Nehru
refused to go.
meet him, yeah.
But Gandhi said, yes, I will.
Although both met Hitler.
But that's for another strategic reason. Yeah?
The enemy of my enemy
But
is my friend.
Yes. But Gandhi was on the side of Nehru on this matter. But the point he was making is, if I am negotiating with one dictator in India, why can't I talk to another dictator elsewhere? He did not allow the liberal imperialist the security that they were purely liberal.
Well, Madhavan, two of your very close kith and kin figure in this biography. Your own grandfather, M.A. Candid, got Krishna Menon admission into the famous Presidency College in then Madras and got him out of trouble when, he unfurled the Home Rule flag.
Yes.
And your uncle, General Candid, who led the Indian Army into Goa in 1961 when Krishna Menon was Defence Minister. So I found that the Candid connection very strong in the book.
It's always amusing and interesting to have some personal involvement in these kinds of things, or to this extent. But I suppose they were somewhat peripheral.
But it's extraordinary when you look back on it. In the 50s, you had V.P. Menon advising Sardar Patel, you had Krishna Menon advising Nehru, you had K.P.S. Menon, you had K.M. Panikar, you had Raghavan Pillai, you had T.G. Sanjeevi Pillai heading the Intelligence Bureau.
And a whole lot of other Menons in the civil service who were secretaries to government.
So meningitis.
Meningitis
in the 1950s.
The next person who suffered from similar Kerala philia, if I might call it that way, is Manmohan Singh.
But by the way, we should not forget Mathai, who was a very central figure in the life of both Krishna Menon as well as Nehru to begin with. But yes, the Malayalis did have a great dog. One great surprise for me after reading this, after going through the archives, was how about Krishna Menon opposed the creation of Kerala. Krishna Menon is a demigod.
He's a demigod there, but that's the irony of these things. They do not realize what his real position was in many of that.
Absolutely. He actually he supported Nehru in the imposition of President's rule in 1959,
that's right.
and then dismissal of AMS.
But he was not parochial at all. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
You see, his vision was established in London, and he arrived at all his ideological positions there.
Yeah.
So it was a global fight against imperialism and fascism, a domestic fight to gain independence, to preserve the unity of the country, and like those who went through the trauma of the partition, he looked upon the linguistic states as likely to
he in fact
create
said,
another partition.
In fact, he said that Kerala will emerge as a bastion of communism, and Tamil Nadu, or Madras as it was called, will emerge as a bastion of separatism. And fanaticism.
Which was the trend at that time, because you had just had an insurrection in Kerala.
So let me ask you this question. Your views on Nehru changed after 100 volumes. Did your views on Krishna Menon change a little after reading Chequered Williams?
It filled in all the gaps, I might say, and I must congratulate you on a wonderful book, good reading, and put it all together in so many ways. So it did not so much change as reinforced my conviction that this was a person of immense brilliance, great conviction, capacities, commitment, but who was his own worst enemy, as you have repeatedly demonstrated, because all that he was accused of, he was not guilty of, except, of course, personal abrasiveness. That certainly he was, that we know. But he was accused of being a communist, which he wasn't. In fact, as you just pointed out, he didn't want Kerala to become another state because it became a bastion of communism. Everyone made the mistake that being friendly to the communists for tactical reasons was being communist. Or being friendly to the Soviet Union was being communist.
Well,
this is a mistake.
You mentioned, you raised the issue of Soviet Union, and you have spent a lifetime studying the Soviet Union. You're a Soviet scholar. One of the things that what really weakened Krishna Menon in 1962 during the war with China was that the Soviets were not as forthcoming
Yes.
and as unequivocal as they should have been
Yeah.
in their support. They supported the Chinese brothers,
First,
and they
yes.
also, then made some genuflections towards the Indian friends. And in Parliament, as I discovered through the archives, Krishna Menon was actually being accused of,
Being pro-Soviet.
pro-Soviet, and the Soviets didn't deliver in the crunch. What do you think? What happened?
I think it was not that he was being pro-Soviet, it was expecting military supply from the
So
Soviet
why
Union,
did the
and that
Soviet-
was and he's waiting to see whether they will commit before committing to the Americans.
But why do you think the Soviets were so ambivalent to begin with on their position on the China? Well,
Well, they had broken with the Chinese, but it was not yet so clear that they could come down firmly on the side of India.
Well, my theory, which I've tried to describe, which you must have read, is that there were two crises going on contemporaneously.
Yes.
There was China's invasion of India, and there was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes.
At the same time.
Same time.
Literally.
Yeah.
They overlapped with each other.
And they needed China's support.
And then we need China
Precisely.
support.
So
So I
they
think we
could
need to
not.
look at it in a
Yeah,
larger
they have to be
perspective.
seen globally. That's very, very true. It could not be seen only in Indian terms. And at the same time, China wanted to separate a possible entente between India and the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And therefore also drove the wedge through.
So tell
through
me,
this invasion.
you think in 62, by 62, it was evident that the Soviets and the Chinese were drifting apart?
Oh, very much so. They had already split. Nehru had predicted it much earlier.
Yeah.
The Americans also had predicted it. So everyone is expecting them to draw apart. But that it would be so bitter, of course, we expected so soon. So this is long expected. And the Chinese felt the heat of isolation very much. And one of the ways of overcoming that isolation was to attack India and hope to drive Soviet Union.
But one thing on the Soviet Union, Mr. Modi has made a big thing out of Make in India. But in the early 60s, when we needed a fighter aircraft, the choice, the Americans were not giving us to make in India. The Brits were not giving us to make in India. Krishna Menon signed the agreement with the Soviet Union for MiG-21, for the MiGs.
Which
And
caused great anxiety in Britain
and in
America.
fact, we lost a lot of friends. And Nehru was very careful. Nehru said,
very
let's not,
cautious.
very cautious, don't antagonize the Americans, don't antagonize the British. But finally, it's the Make in India argument that Krishna Menon
No,
gave.
you made that point regularly in the volume, that Krishna Menon actually had got his sights right, that you have to have defense capacity developed internally. Yes. And therefore the tank factories, the aircraft, the DRDO especially, and something, if I might ask, what about the Sainik schools? Also training of
absolutely.
future...
I didn't mention the Sainik schools in the
yes.
book, but you're absolutely right.
So that is one further element.
Yeah.
So Krishna Menon had it right, that you have go for self-reliance. And this is why he saw eye to eye with Nehru. Nehru saw it in a much larger national sense, and he did it all through the planning mechanism. Krishna Menon did it through his department, which was defense.
It's very interesting. I just unearthed something that the father of the current foreign minister, external affairs minister, Shahid Jaishankar, K. Subramanian,
Yes.
who was India's foremost defense expert, he, in an interview with Madhavan Kutti, the noted journalist who wrote a book on Krishna Menon in 1988, Madhavan Kutti had interviewed Subramanian, and Subramanian was on record, and I was able to get a transcript of that, where he says that, in 1962, it was fundamentally a failure of military leadership and military command.
I fully agree.
But
Yes.
the politicians took all the blame, and because the first reports, the first books were published by the military.
I fully agree, and I'm glad you pointed that out in your book. It's about time that was done. You see, both Nehru and Krishna Menon took it on the chin.
Yes, absolutely.
As leaders, they took the responsibility.
Yeah.
But when you read all the reports, the failures was of military leadership. And Srinath Raghavan has also further pointed out precisely such details.
Yes, absolutely.
Of the uncertainties, bungling, the there was no plan, as it were.
In fact, I was able to get an article that Timaya, who's a hero. People say if Timaya was army chief, we would not have had this disaster. But Timaya wrote 5 months before the war, in
Yes,
July of
that's
1962, in seminar,
We can't
saying
face
that
them.
we can't fight the Chinese, we should not fight the Chinese, and that the solution should be, through political and diplomatic
In fact, I would go further. What you have pointed out is the Maya comes out rather badly.
Yeah.
I mean, he was there almost intriguing with the British High Commissioner.
Yes.
It's claiming that Krishna Menon was planning some sort of a coup or creating a base within the army to take over after Nehru, which I find incredible. But that seems to have been a story that was circulating in army circles, because Khera has also repeated that, as you said. And you've also given other accounts of how people like Thorat, whom Thimaya wanted to be his successor, penalized one general, S.P. Varma, for financial irregularities, and 2 days later changed his mind.
Absolutely.
On what basis we do not know, without any inquiry. It seems highly whimsical
And,
conduct at
the
the
other-
top of the military leadership.
The other thing that I was discovered was that J.N. Chaudhary,
And Chowdhury was the chief leaker of all.
he was moonlighting as the military correspondent of the Statesman.
No, you've given me that point, as well as the Maya writing straight to the president
Yes.
for the next appointment of the COAS, which is highly irregular, I have thought, for
I
a
think-
person who's been brought up in the traditions that he's meant to have been brought up. Which suggests to me that Nehru gave the army a very long rope.
Yes.
There's a folklore within the armed forces that Nehru was very dismissive and restrictive of the armed forces. I always got the feeling that he pandered rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
And they merely lost their importance because they were no longer the top notch as they were in colonial times.
Yeah.
Because they were subject to civilian leadership, they felt it. And therefore they took it all out on Nehru. But from all the details that you have given in your book, it seems the other way around. All the top generals were intriguing against each other in a shocking way.
Yes.
What is P.N. Thapa sending letters to Maya
And Thorat.
Thorat, asking for explanations? And how can P.N. Thapa do it when he is still their deputy? You said it is obviously with the
concurrence. You can't, army chief can't
Concurrence.
write to these guys without the defense minister knowing.
But if you please tell me, Thapar is writing saying I'm directed by the PM.
Yeah. I find that,
So is the Nehru himself in the story? And can a subordinate write to a superior asking for explanations?
no. So it's clear to me.
It's
and
bizarre.
I could not resist the conclusion
Yeah.
that the prime minister and the defense minister both knew that Thapa was writing this. And behind all this was the Mephistophelian figure of B.N. Kaur,
B.N. Kaur, of course.
who really,
Yes.
was really a singularly disastrous appointment. He was a great-
About Kaur, everybody is unanimous.
Yes, see,
that is true. But of course, he came up in the army system.
Yeah.
That also must be
And
recognized.
Timaya, he was very
And
close to Timaya.
close to Timaya
He served with
and
Timaya
all.
in Korea.
Yes.
And with Thorat and Timaya in Korea.
So even if he was a favorite later on, how did he come all the way to the top?
Yeah.
Surely he was not picked up by Nehru when he was second lieutenant.
So coming back to the selected works, I mean, do you see this as valuable reference material for students of history? Do you see this being accessible widely to scholars in colleges and universities? What
Yes,
would
it
be
is.
the value?
It is immensely valuable because it is gives you the documentary history of modern India in one sense. I mean, of the 20th century up to Nehru's prime ministership to the end of it. It is the primary source. It should be the primary source. And if we put in all the archives together and completed it, it would undoubtedly be the primary source.
By the way, there were some letters of Nehru to Krishna Menon, which are not there in the Nehru archives, which I found in the Krishna Menon archives.
See,
Well, that's very interesting. For
This is-
example, a letter that
I know.
Krishna Menon, Nehru writes to Krishna Menon introducing Firoz Gandhi to him.
Mhm.
It's there in the Menon archives,
Yeah.
but it's not there in the Nehru archives. So I think we need to pull all these archives together.
No, I mean, we must overcome the irrationality of our archives policies that you close some things and open some things and at different times, and I do not see any reason for closing or opening the way they do.
Yeah.
Keep everything open and let everybody do so and bring it all out. And we must have it all together. But it's meaningless to go running around in different archives reading things.
So what would be the relevance of these collected works, selected works, for the current discourse, public discourse,
Well, you can
other than being historical material?
you can understand the most important aspects of what constitutes India today. One of the most important things in it is what is a citizen of India?
Yes.
That is something you can see on every page practically. It's discussed one way or the other, through communalism, through the what Nehru calls linguism, casteism. Again and again the same question arises. And Nehru firmly stands in favor of secular individuality as the primary nature of Indian citizenship and not any other group. Every other group has to be protected and given advantages for historical deprivation and not because they're just...
And he keeps talking of the secular state.
Yes.
He doesn't reject the idea of a religious society.
Not at all.
In fact, he says that we are a multi-religious society.
Right, yes.
But he's talking of a secular state. And I think that distinction is often lost in the public debate.
He keeps that on the front burner all the time, that this is a secular state, and within the process of secularization you can have any number of religions.
Yeah.
And religions are in fact protected and secured and maintained by a secular system. It is not an attack upon religion at all.
I find it very interesting that today everybody is reading the preamble. In every public meeting, everybody has discovered the preamble to the Constitution, and Krishna Menon played a very important role in the drafting of that preamble. In fact, the words independent, sovereign republic come from Krishna Menon. And Krishna Menon actually is a consistent supporter and advocate of the idea of having a constituent assembly.
Yes.
From 1933 onwards.
That's right.
In fact, it was Gandhi who was a bit reluctant on the idea of a constituent assembly, but then he comes around, and once he comes around, the Congress party embraces the idea, and finally we have the constituent assembly in 1946. So,
when everybody now cites the preamble so passionately, they are reinforcing Nehru's original vision.
Yes.
That we are all citizens of this country and not members of any community.
Yes.
That is what takes priority over everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's no other way of defining citizenship except by the fact that you are a resident here. And that is what's called civic citizenship.
See, the other thing that came across in my biography, and certainly I'm sure it comes across in the selected works, in 1967, Krishna Menon doesn't get a Congress ticket. He quits the Congress party. In 69, he contests in a by-election in Midnapore and wins. And that's also S.K. Patil, who is his ideological polar opposite, right? He loses 67, but he continues to be in the Congress, and he gets re-elected from Banaskantha in Gujarat in 69. Both of them are declared elected the same day in these by-elections, and they come to Parliament. And somebody asks Krishna Menon, what do you think of the future of India in some context? So Krishna Menon says, well, if India can elect S.K. Patil from Banaskantha and V.K. Krishna Menon from Midnapore, the future of India is very bright. Very bright, and then in 1962...
It's a powerful affirmation of pluralism.
Yeah.
That's right.
And in 1962, the only election on which a book has been written, the famous election, Kripalani was from Krishna Menon. Krishna Menon wins handsomely, but he goes to call on Kripalani. And then, they have a very warm...
they were all comrades in arms at one
See,
time. And they had much to do with each other, and they haven't given that up. And at least they're able to communicate across that divide in spite of that.
Tell me another thing, Madhavan. When you look at the selected works, somebody writes to Nehru. And Nehru replies, my dear Pantji, I'm just taking an example, my dear Pantji. And he's replying on the 14th of April. And he says, I have received your letter on the 13th of April. Well, maybe Pantji is not a good example because Govindwala Pant is his cabinet colleague. But
and so many others.
Any letter.
It is so often I received a letter today.
And
replying the same day.
And replying the same day.
And if he takes 3 or 4 days over it, he says, I'm sorry I took so long.
So I think both Krishna Menon and Nehru, as did Gandhi, belong to the epistolary era, right? An era in which writing letters, putting down thoughts on paper was very important. We are not a written culture, we are an oral culture. But Gandhi, Nehru, Bose, Patel...
Well, by then they had become a writing culture, I think.
But we lost that, after Nehru.
Now, of course. Now it is all sound bites.
Yeah,
I suppose. It is Twitter responses that we have. And people do not reply the same way. But it is also a mark of their commitment, I think. that they take these matters seriously as to reply on every issue, which I think is not to be found so easily today. Today is a case of entitlement, that you're not under any obligation, you're not answerable to people the same way. Then you were campaigning, you were answerable, you responded on every matter, you thought it was your duty to do so, and make yourself clear to everybody. They didn't hesitate to do so. There was a work ethic to it. I do not know also if there is the work ethic of the European in it.
Yes.
Because all three of them were
all European, well,
completely
both.
European
But I would
in
say,
their works and their
I
habits.
would say that Nehru and Menon both were good
Right.
Britishers, but true Indians.
Very British.
Very British.
And
well,
Gandhi not less.
Gandhi not less.
In
Yeah.
every way, he was trained professionally. All lawyers, they're all professionals in the European mold.
Yes.
So nothing was of the chalta attitude about it. It had to be taken care of fully. But now let me ask you about one thing about Krishna Menon. Why didn't he come to the Constituent Assembly? This is such an obvious thing for him to participate in. He had played a role in drafting important parts of it, or setting the ball rolling, and so on. This is an obvious place for him to come and participate in the debates. He was absent at the wrong moment.
Didn't want to leave London. He wanted to be Nehru's global envoy.
Yeah.
And in 47, Constituent Assembly comes in December 46. By then he's already Nehru's global envoy.
Yes, he is already.
Already been appointed
In the
global
30s
envoy,
practically.
meeting Molotov, meeting all sorts of leaders. And then by August 47, he plays a role in the transfer of power in the negotiations with Mountbatten.
That's right.
And then in August he becomes the High Commissioner. I think Krishna Menon is really reluctant to come back to India, frankly.
He does look like it.
Yes, he went to England in 1924. He's been.
Did he feel out of place in India? In some way?
I think he felt out of place here
Because he could not speak to the public?
He could not speak to the public. He spoke only English. He could not.
But then in places like Constituent Assembly were
he could not.
ideal for him.
Yeah, but
Where all his ideas could have been worked out.
he never asked Nehru. He never asked him that I want to come to the Constituent Assembly.
Yes, I know.
The only request he makes is, let me be on the panel of experts. And Nehru makes him a member of the panel of experts in July of 1946. He was very reluctant to come back. I think he was a member of the Labour Party. He would have.
No, he was more involved in British politics than in Indian politics.
He would have been a
at that
good
time.
member of the House of Commons. But I think
It seems a bit puzzling to me
but,
because it is not something that he need have been inhibited about.
But Malvan, I think Nehru saw him as a global extension. That he was, a troubleshooter. He was an envoy.
No, I can understand Nehru seeing him that way and wanting him there.
But you
I
don't
would
understand
hope,
why Krishna Menon
Krishna Menon would have, at such a crucial moment when you're shaping the future of the country through a constitution,
I think he
when you must put down all your
too
ideas.
much committed to the India League. He wanted to keep the India League going. He was too much committed to living. He was too comfortable living in London.
But was it a comfortable life?
No, living comfortable in poverty. He was not
London life is not exactly
living very comfortably in London.
of that
But
kind.
he was a Britisher. He was really more of a Britisher. He had no friends in India. All of his friends were Lasky, Stafford Cripps,
They're all there.
Grenfell, and he had been borough councillor for 14 years, editor of Penguin and Pelican. So he was, more in the English
Yes, he
mode.
had become a British public intellectual.
He was a British public intellectual,
Yeah.
and member of the Labour Party.
And Labour Party and involved in such major publishing ventures as Penguin and so on.
But
That's true, he
played a very important role in the decision ultimately to have the Constituent Assembly, because he was a consistent voice.
So I thought he'd move smoothly on into the Constitution because that's given me even larger role.
See,
he could have switched back and forth.
The other thing that came as a revelation to me was the extraordinary relationship that he and Masani had. Because Masani
It's so strange, yes.
Masani was his bitterest critic.
Later
Masani
on,
and Kripalani
But
were.
Masani was a fellow traveller in the
In fact,
30s.
Masani was more pro-Soviet than
That's
Nehru
right.
and
More than Nehru was.
and-
If you read Masani's early pamphlets and so on. So this happens to fellow travelers of that kind, that when they swing to the other side,
They become
so
extremely,
travelers, they
absolutely.
become extremely.
And I was.
But
I was really-
why do you think, you have said that Krishna Menon was sort of climbing onto the bandwagon when he joined Nehru and abandoned the CSP. Do you think that's a fair comment?
Well, you see, there were multiple agencies. There were at least 5 or 6 agencies and outfits in England claiming to speak on behalf of the Indian nationalist movement, of which the India League was one.
Yeah.
And he did not have the special and exalted place in British politics till he was seen as being
Nehru's
Nehru's man. It really becomes Nehru's man.
No, but was it wouldn't Nehru have been his choice by conviction rather than any opportunity?
No, he was. They were both democratic socialists.
Yes.
You know, they shared similar
the same
interests,
kind of socialism, the same suspicions
friends,
of communism.
same friends.
Mhm.
You know, the same. The same vision of Indian national movement as part of a global movement against anti-imperialist forces.
And certainly more global than any of the CSP leaders were. They would have
But
seen more eye to eye.
I think the CSP. He realized the CSP was not in the mainstream. You know, of the Congress party.
There was something of a splinter.
It was a splinter. They were firebrands. He was very close to Lohia. They were very close to Ashok Mehta.
But Lohia was a different kind of person.
And you know,
we can't recognize the two Lohias.
Absolutely. You can't recognize the two Ashok Mehtas. You can't recognize the two Masanis. To that extent.
No, Masanis I can almost recognize because that's the sort of trajectory that many of them.
But I can tell you, the people who stand out for consistency are Krishna Menon and Nehru.
That's right.
Because from the mid-30s, they are advocating this democratic socialist line.
Right.
Unlike Masani, or unlike Lohia or Ashok Mehta, you know, who swing from one end to the other. Or even Jayaprakash Narayan. JP was the founder
That's right.
of the CSP, the Congress Socialist Party.
But here, there's another interesting point. I mean, this is due to Krishna Menon's residence in England, I presume. When the war came, he wanted India to be on the British side.
Yes.
He did not see the importance of the position that Nehru took, that you are anti-fascist, but you're not pro-British.
You're not pro-British.
This is crucial.
He was very pro-British.
Now that is what allowed Nehru, I suspect, to go on smoothly into non-alignment. And Krishna Menon's accepting non-alignment was not of the same theoretical fervor or commitment as Nehru's was.
Krishna Menon
He was pro-British. That is how he could think of being in the Commonwealth one day.
By the way,
advocate it.
Without Krishna Menon, it's unlikely that India would have remained in the Commonwealth because Nehru was very ambivalent on the Commonwealth.
That's true.
Very ambivalent. It was Mountbatten from the British side and Attlee, but from the Indian side, it was Krishna Menon and Girija Shankar Bajpai who was pushing it.
Now, Girija Shankar Bajpai, okay, we might expect that.
But Krishna
Menon doing it. No, look at the contrast. Krishna Menon on the one hand advocating the Commonwealth, and the other hand being pro-Soviet,
yes,
and anti-American, anti-Western later on. He gets such a pro-communist reputation. At the same time, he is so Anglophile that at the crucial decision-making and strategic thinking during the war, he muffed it a little bit, I feel. This is where Nehru's strategic thinking and global vision has a clarity which is superior to anybody else's.
You see, I think he used the British Communist Party.
That of course.
Because the British Communist Party was the only party which was, arguing for full Indian independence. And the relationships that he had with Pollitt, Bradley, Rajnipal Mehta and so on. And he often said that, the fact that the communists are supporting me does not mean I love the communists, it means the communists love me. So it does not mean that I love him. But I don't think, and there is a Scotland Yard report which says, on him, which says that he's attending all these meetings of the British Communist Party, he's addressing communist forums, but Menon can never be a communist because he lacks the discipline for being. So he's a maverick, and that's the problem with him as defense minister.
That's right.
The army built on hierarchy, built on systems, and here's this man who's basically a nihilist.